All right, good morning, grade 7. On to lesson 10.3 in our book. So yesterday we worked on adding and subtracting rational numbers. Now we're going to do addition and subtraction with equations, also known as algebra. Yes, you've noticed as have I that algebra comes up in every single unit in grade 7. So again, I'm going to start with a little bit of review of regular algebra, and then we'll get into using algebra with fractions and with decimals. So here we have m plus 8 equals 20. Remember, our variable is the letter where we want to find or solve what that letter is worth. So in order to figure out what the letter is worth, we want to get it by itself. So we take a look at what's happening to that letter. Right now we have m plus 8. We do the opposite. So the opposite of adding 8 is we subtract 8. Okay? Notice how my equal signs are staying underneath each other as much as possible. M plus 8 minus 8. What you do to one side, you must do to the other. So because I've subtracted 8 from one side, I also need to subtract from the other side in order to keep an equation, to keep it equal on each side. These things cancel out. I end up with m all by itself. M equals 20 minus 8, so m equals 12. If I wanted to, I could put my number 12 back over here in my equation, and I could think to myself, that makes sense. 12 plus 8 does equals 20. All right, let's do another one. Y minus 4 equals 10. So again, write out what you have, y minus 4. Then do the opposite of what's being done to y. Right now we're subtracting 4. The opposite is to add 4. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. So because I added 4 on one side, I need to add 4 on the other side. This cancels out. I get y equals 14. Again, I can go back to the top. Does it make sense? 14 minus 4 is 10. It does. All right, so that was a little bit of review. Now let's get into evaluating expressions. So evaluating an expression is not the same as solving for a variable. In this case, I'm being told what a is. So if a is 3/4, what is this statement? I want to simplify it. So what I can do is I can just start by writing out what I have. And then where a is, I know what a is. I'm going to plug it in there. 3/4. Now I have a regular subtraction equation. In order to solve it, because I'm working with subtracting fractions, I need to change my 3/4 so that I have the same denominator. I'll change it to 6/8. Again, as review, I said, what did I do to the 4 to make it an 8? I multiplied by 2. So I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. 19 and 7/8, take away 6/8, leaves me with 19 and 1/8. Okay, let's do another one with evaluating expressions. So this one has 2 variables. It also involves a little bit of BEDMAS. I need to do what is inside the brackets first. So again, always start, just write out exactly what you have. Okay, where a is, I'm going to put 3/4. Where b is, I'm going to put negative 1/8. One of the most important things in this lesson, grade 7, is watch out for your negatives. They keep coming up. When I was practicing this lesson before I taught it on the video, even I forgot one of the negatives. It's very easy to do. Now, because we're following BEDMAS, I have to do what's inside the brackets first. Otherwise, it changes my equation. So I'm going to think to myself, 3/4. I can make that into 6/8. 6/8 plus negative 1/8. When I'm adding a positive and a negative, I think about the difference between them. The difference between their absolute values was 5/8. And I know it's going to be positive because my 6/8 was bigger. So now, in a sense, you can think I've dealt with this whole section. I write out what I have left. Negative 4 3/4 plus 5/8. I can think to myself 3/4. That's 6/8. I'm not going to write it out completely because I don't have room. But I can add it together. So I have negative 4 6/8. Actually, I think I will write it out because this is what I want to show you. Because I'm working with a negative and a positive. So grade 7, do not make the same mistake that I did. I thought to myself, well, perfect. I can just add 6/8 and 5/8. But notice This whole section here is negative. So negative 4 6/8 plus 5/8. I still am going to find the difference between those two numbers. So the difference between 6/8 and 5/8 is 1/8. And then I still have the whole number of 4. So my answer here is actually overall negative 4 1/8. So don't forget about that negative number. I couldn't just add them. I actually had to find the difference, and I ended up with overall a negative number. All right, let's do one more. M plus 4 5/8 equals 2 1/4. So again, this is now we're on to solving. So I write out what I have, and then I do the opposite, just like my example from before. So I subtract 4 5/8. Try and squeeze it in here. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I subtract 4 5/8. This cancels out. Sorry that my equal signs don't quite line up. So now I get 2 1/4 subtract 4 5/8. I'm going to do 2 steps at once here. Because I know I need to subtract or add with fractions, I'm going to automatically make my 1/4 into eighths. So I get 2 2/8. Okay. Then I'm going to subtract 4 5/8. Now, when I'm working with subtraction, another option is to add the opposite. So instead, what I can do is I can add a negative 4 5/8. Back to our review lesson on working with negative integers, I can find the difference between these two numbers. So I can do 4 5/8, subtract 2 2/8, and I get 5 take away 2 is 3/8 and 2. So I get 2 3/8. Now the question is it positive or is it negative? Well, I go back over here. I have a positive number. The absolute value is 2 2/8, and I have a negative value. This one over here, my negative number had the greater absolute value, but because it is negative, my answer is going to be negative. All right, one more solving for the given variable. I thought I would review one with decimals with you. So notice the M is on the opposite side that we're used to, but it's fine. I can just switch it around because it doesn't matter with addition. So I can just switch it around into a format I'm more comfortable with. Subtract 2.8 from one side. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. Subtract 2.8. I almost made the classic mistake. I forgot my negative sign. These cancel out. So I get M equals negative 7.81. Subtract 2.8. Again, remember with subtraction, I can add the opposite. So negative 7.81 plus, what's the opposite? The opposite is negative 2.8. Don't be tricked into thinking that this number over here is already negative. It's not. I'm subtracting a positive. Now, because I have 2 negative numbers, it's actually quite handy because I can just add them up together. So I can go over to the side, 7.81, 2.8. I can add them together and I get 10.61. Don't forget to line up your decimals. But again, don't forget you added 2 negative numbers. The answer is negative. So in your lesson today, there's a lot of places where you can easily make a mistake. So go very slowly. If you're ending up with weird and crazy answers, you probably made a mistake somewhere along the line. You can always message me on chat or even video call me if you need help with this lesson. All right, talk to you.